Kindred Heavens. The Kickstarter for that just ended, so we don't have our books with us today, but it's been a lot of fun, and Tim's the one making me do this. But we're just going to try and enjoy ourselves and ignore any fear of public speaking that we may have. So yeah.
I'm Bryce. I'm the writer of Kindred Heavens, also the writer of our other book, The Panty Bear, which he didn't introduce. I learned about this just yesterday, so this is news to me. I don't have a fear of public speaking, but I do like to ramble, so I'm sorry about that. I've been writing since I was 15. I've been writing with him since he was 15, and yeah, I just make comics.
I'm Timothy Lim. I'm one of the creators of Kamen America, and so if you've seen this girl on all the badges and all of the cups and whatever, this is our 6th year doing Bell County Comic Con. Not a lot of people know it, but Iconic Comics and Bell County Comic Con have a symbiotic relationship because the owners of Bell County have a financial stake in Iconic Comics as well, and so our intellectual property is on a lot of the things that you'll see here. I am mostly the artist, even though I do collaborate with my writer, Mark Pelligrini. You can see kind of this trend here. We have artist, writer going on. Over at the end, and then you have Doug. His artist is downstairs selling $1 kitties, so always make sure to stop by the booth and check it out because it's quite adorable, and it's one of the cheapest souvenirs that you can have here at the show.
My name is Mark Pelligrini. I'm the writer and co-creator of Kamen America. Tim pretty much introduced everything that I could possibly say, so I won't take long. Just Carly. This little guy you've been seeing, his name is Badger, the capybara. He's also from Kamen America. And then this guy over here, it's a grenadier badger. He's got his hand grenades.
From here.
Oh, yeah. And those two guys over there, that's USAGI from our other book, Black Ops, which is a commando military book. And then that's Kappa Kapu, who is a fictional mascot from within the Kamen America and Black Ops universe. Just so you know, all these friendly faces staring at you.
There are also, some of them are like Badger and, sorry, social media, but the Badger and the Captain, they're actually for sale.
Yeah.
And the hat opens up and Badger actually fits inside. I've done it.
He can ride in the ramen cup
Yeah.
like that.
It unzips on the top. Yeah. But we have these at the booth, at the Iconic Comics booth, if you want to get lopsided early. You can talk while
Cool. My name is Douglas Ernst. I'm the writer and creator of Soulfinder, which is my series on combat veteran exorcists that take on this demon called Blackfire until the end of time with their detective buddy. And I've been blessed to be able to work with Tim and Mark. Tim actually did the art on the first book. Matt Weldon, who's downstairs with the kitties, he's done the inside artwork since then. And then Dave Dorman's actually been kind enough to do some covers for us as well. So Dave's downstairs as well. You might want to check out his booth.
We're going to give you all a brief history of Iconic Comics and kind of set the stage for any questions that you might have. So the main topic for the panel, I think, is creating a universe. And I think even more so than that is kind of how you even get started. Because I know that typically when we do this panel every year, there's a lot of young artists, and you have your own hopes and dreams and ideas of what you want to do for your comic series. It's not easy, that's one thing I can tell you, but it is doable, especially if you have the wherewithal and the imagination to do it. Iconic Comics started because all of us individually had certain things that we wanted to do and we had certain stories to tell. But there's always strength in numbers as far as being able to kind of pull your resources together and work on different things. So as these gentlemen have introduced themselves, they obviously have their own titles, but we all operate under one umbrella, which is Iconic Comics. We're able to get together, share ideas, see how we can kind of bounce ideas off of each other. Like, for example, I've known Scott for 3 years, even before I knew of his work, because I saw his art on social media, and I saw, like, hey, I think this guy might be open for commissions, and so he was doing some art for Kamen America 3 years before he even decided to even consider joining Iconic Comics. If you've been going to Bell County Comic Con and you pass by the highway and see the billboards, you've seen his art for 3 years. And so it's kind of funny that here we are 3 years later and he's joined us. And so we all operate with independent properties that sometimes coincide with each other. We've had team-ups with Douglas Ernst's book, and don't know about Kindred Heaven, so how it always has to work, but their book takes place in like an alternate past. And because ours takes place in an alternate present, and we have certain rules like no time travel, it's gonna make it kind of hard for our two properties to kind of tessellate and get together. But if there's a will, there's a way, and we can kind of think of ways of doing it. So the main topic for today is, I guess, how we construct our individual universes and the rules that we set in them, kind of the pitfalls and difficulties of having to navigate them. At any time, like I said, I think we're going to have an FAQ at the end, but if you have a question, just feel free to raise your hand and interrupt us, because that's what we're here for. We've had a busy morning and we've had a lot of interruptions that are good, because we like seeing everyone coming by and saying hello, and especially people who know our work from online. But that's what we're here for this panel. So I'm going to leave it with Scott and Bryce here for a few minutes and let them talk about not only the work they've done with the Panty Bear, but also give you kind of an idea or a taste of Kindred Heavens and kind of how they work as a cohesive whole to construct the universe that they have and the stories that they want to tell. So I'll let Scott and Bryce kind of talk over for a little bit.
Thank you, Tim. Adding on to what he said, the cool thing about Iconic is that everybody gets to learn from each other's mistakes. I mean, we're all like independent, we're all doing this, and we were fortunate enough that the campaign for Kindred Heavens actually passed the first campaign for Kamen America, which I like to gloat to Tim about. Don't rub it in. but part of the reason that happened is because we got to not make the same mistakes he made. We got his advice and the advice of the team there. So that's the good thing about it, and the why we can all stick together and hopefully make stuff that people really enjoy, stuff that people really like, which is really, that's what it's all about. Like ever since, we were 15, we started doing this, like it was all about just making the stuff that we loved. Like, we didn't want to make something just to make it, right? It was like, well, we really love comics. Like we really have stories that we want to tell. And for us, it always goes back to the story. And so to be able to do that now for a living is like super awesome, and it's large part of it's thanks to Tim and everybody at Iconic, and Doug. Doug's my friend over there.
And you can tell everyone you do this as full time.
Yeah, I do.
And that's before he joined Iconic just about 2 or 3 months ago. They both did. In fact, I don't think they mind me saying this, but even Bryce over here even moved down to join Scott over in Kentucky, because he knew that if they're going to get this partnership, it would obviously be more beneficial for them to be very close together in terms of proximity. And I said, that's really interesting, because when we started working in merchandising, which was 10 years ago, Mark moved down from Virginia to my home state of Arkansas, because he, in his mind, also thought, well, if we're going to start doing this and building something out of it, it would be more beneficial to be in closer physical proximity to each other.
Yeah, and that it helps a lot, and it's something that we'll talk a little bit about this as the panel goes on. But when we started out, the first thing that we really put out there that got any traction was the Panty Bear. It started out as a web comic, and it did okay. And then I started drawing like pinups of the main character Lucia, and people lost their minds over that. That was like, people love that. And that did so well, it led to some other opportunities, and that's what permitted him to be able to move down. Like, we were able to say, like, okay, this is really turning into like something that we can do, something we can manage. This is like a job now, and we're very fortunate for that.
Especially after spending the first 7 years of our career broke, which was not fun. But it is cool that we essentially started by, like I said, we released the Panty Bear, and it had a small but very loyal fan base. Some people still to this day, it's really cool having people come up to our booth and know the Panty Bear, because we kind of always feel like it's been forgotten a little bit. Aside from the main character, it kind of became a little bit bigger than the book itself. But we were always really proud of it and always wanted to further push into comics. And Kindred Heavens we worked on for about 2 years, because as Tim said, it's historical. It's set in like an alternate 1920s and revolves around essentially a racing company that races these almost Wright Brothers-esque planes and competes, and it vividly involves the daughter of the biggest wind racing company in the world that is having a fall from grace, and she is trying to keep her family's company alive while dealing with these other bigger corporations that are trying to eke them out. And a lot of it was just built through a lot of research. It took 2 years to dig it. This is book 1 that we just kickstarted. It's going to be 4 books, and it was a lot of research. I made him read a lot about planes, and he was really upset about how much he had to study about planes. especially when I'd draw the inside of this plane, and you wouldn't know what that meant because I wouldn't describe it.
I have schematics for jet engines and all sorts of stuff.
But our process, the way him and I work, is that we're a duo through and through. We started making comics when we were 15 because we like Naruto, and that's the simple answer. We like.
You run like him too?
Yeah, we like Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, Bleach. We grew up with all those kind of things, and honestly, it just made us want to make comics. And so when we were 15, we didn't have anything else going for us, and so we started writing comics, and we were broke for a long time afterwards. But it all comes from a place of sort of loving that, and the way we work is. We write everything together. We essentially plot and outline everything together. Our process is entirely 50-50 through and through, up until we get to scripting. So Kindred Heaven is one thing I always tell people. I like to say Scott is a writer on our books too, and it always makes people look kind of weird, but because I genuinely think, because he outlines and helps me with everything. The only part I take over is when it's putting the pages, like writing what the pages are. And then the only part he does on his own is the artwork. So we do everything 50-50, all the world building, all the everything is 50-50.
I want to talk about your world building real quick. Oh, did you have a question? Did someone have a question? No? Okay. So, I've read the book. Oh, Rob has a question. Okay.
So, anime has inspired you just like it inspired Tim and Mark?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's anime and manga and Western stuff. I mean, I think you can tell by even my artwork. It's like a lot of Eastern stuff, but also a lot of Western stuff. And so like, he mentioned one of the big ones early on was Naruto, and we were like, man, that's cool. We want to write a 1,000 chapter story, and we tried to do that as our first thing, and that didn't happen. But various things, and not even just like anime and manga, but also like live action stuff. Like actually a big inspiration. This is very strange because I don't think you can tell by reading the book, but one of the big inspirations for Kindred Heavens was like Quentin Tarantino films and like just stuff like that, because of the way the dialogue was written. We were like, that's really cool. How do we make our dialogue that good? And inspiration can come from anywhere. Like the Panty Bear, one of the big inspirations for how we composed that story was actually just like watching pro wrestling. And we were this is like how you make a villain look good, and we just looked at like wrestling heels, like, okay, why does the Undertaker look so good? Well, let's do something like that for the villain. Like, let's make them look strong so the heroes look better when they win. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with Kindred Heavens, where did that idea come from? That's what I was curious about.
Well, it started. This is a very niche mention. So there's a movie, Ford versus Ferrari, and there's one scene in the film. I thought the movie was like okay, but there's one scene in the movie where Ferrari is trying to buy Ford, and Ford doesn't sell, and or maybe it's the other way around. I can't remember at this point. And that scene was so well done that I was like, I want to do something like this. Like I want to do something like that, and that's where a lot of our stuff comes from. Is just like story. We start with the story and then we flesh it out from there. And I know, and like everybody's process is different, and you'll hear that when everybody else gets the chance to speak and we quit hogging the mic. But some people start with characters, some people start with the world. For us, it's the story, and we build our world to serve the story itself. Like how do we make the most interesting, cohesive project, and the world is just a part of that. And so everything is shaped around the story for us and our process.
Question over here.
For a story I'm writing, I have the world built up, the characters are all quite literally fleshed out, but what do you do when you have a good world that's set, you have a lot of rules, characters are made, but you aren't sure what to do about the story, and you don't want to plagiarize another story? What do you do about that?
We're gonna let the three writers all give an answer to this, because their answers are really neat.
So for me, I specifically, I'm bad at world building, like actually sitting down and being like, I'm gonna plot out a world, do everything. I write the story. What I do is I use a method that I don't remember who told it. It might be you, or it might be someone you were acquainted with, told me to ask questions. And what that means is essentially, if you're stuck on something or you don't know where to go with something, say you have just one base idea and it's like a girl who's a boxer. You ask, the best way if you're struggling with ideas is to just ask yourself questions. So why is she a boxer? What does she want to do with boxing? How long has she been boxing? And continue to get more detail-oriented questions as you go deeper. The most important thing with that is to not go with whatever the first answer to come into your head is. Because this is an old John Green quote, the guy that wrote Fault in Our Stars. He said, your first answer is your worst answer, because it is the one that everyone's brain goes to. Because essentially your mind pulls from every movie you've ever seen, every book you've ever read, and it just tries to fill in the quickest solution it possibly can. So if you sit on that and go with your second idea, your third idea, your fourth idea, you tend to come up with more ideas that are more you and are more natural and fit your story more. And also, just the biggest part is they're ideas that are more creative. So I always like to, when Scott, he actually came up the initial idea for Kindred Heavens. He watched the movie and then messaged me and said, I'll message you in 3 months with an idea. And then I got like a 4-page document that was the entire story essentially. And he was like, let's write this. So that was actually him. But typically we start with what we call a pitch, essentially like almost like we would pitch to publishers, but we're pitching it to each other. So he'll come up with a pitch, and he'll pitch to me, or I'll come up with a pitch and pitch to him. And the way it works is typically it starts with a simple base idea. So again, it might be like a girl who wants to be a boxer, and that's the log line. That's the whole, like with the Panty Bear, it was basically as simple as a girl harnesses the power of underwear to fight evil plushies. That was the whole idea. And then we just build, and we just keep building on that until essentially you start with just the one line, and you get a paragraph, and then you get a page, and then you get 2 pages. That's called the snowflake method, where essentially you continue to build upon and write. So it's like your first line is just like the basic plot. Your second line is a more detailed, it starts to look at everything a little bit more. If you do your page 1, it starts to go into characterization. If you do your 2 pages, you start to go into the world building. Methods like that, where you kind of constrict yourself and force yourself to look down like a narrow hallway, like very focused, I think are really important to starting to develop a story, especially if you already have a world.
Before I let Mark talk, we have another writer who's not at this panel, but he addressed your specific question about you have all this stuff in your head, and like from that, what do you use? He gave us a really good piece of advice. He said, you did all this research, that's all good, you have this wealth of information, but sometimes the reader doesn't want to know all that. They want to know the juicy part, not everything around it. And so one of the difficulties that we have as a creative team is we have all these ideas, and there's this kind of temptation to want to just stuff everything you have into it. But you can't do that, because some things, like for example, our main character's favorite color, there are things that are interesting because they only live in our brains. We know, for example, like what do our characters have for breakfast? What's their favorite color? What color socks are they wearing? But those are not crucial to the storyline. They're very superfluous details. And so we kind of have to think about that, cut back a lot in terms of those are things that the reader might think are interesting tidbits and trivia, but they're also not important for the overall arcing storyline.
Well, so for your original question, like we start with characters too, even before we have a story. So Carly here, Kamen America, she originated, Tim and I created her for a parody comic. It was just a one-shot comedy, and she was a parody of a Marvel character, and she was just supposed to be used as a one-and-done joke. But people liked her. They liked her redesign. They liked the silly name we gave her. And so we had basically this blank slate of the character, and we adapted her into Kamen America. We spun her off into an original series with completely original plot, unrelated to the parody aspect. Like the Ninja Turtles started out that way. They were parodies of Daredevil, and Deadpool started out that way. It was a parody of Deathstroke. And then from there, we understood Carly's personality. We wrote out her origin, her bio, basically her source book information first, and we find that helps guide the story, because then once you know your character, you know what's your character going to say, what are they going to do next, how will that further the plot along, how will they react to a situation. We had a character that we created, and it started. Her name is Sylvia, and the original idea for her, just the pitch was that we wanted to, because it's an anime and manga send up, was that we wanted one of those female characters that goes, oh, like that. And like, all right, well, what are we going to name her? What are we going to do with her? Why does she laugh like that? What's her relationship to Carly? Okay. And then as we built out that character more, like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we had a gamer character? She loves video games. She's always playing PlayStation. Like, well, why does she love video games? Oh, well, she was rich. Maybe she didn't have a lot of friends when she was a kid. Why didn't she have a lot of friends? Well, maybe they felt awkward going to her big house. Like, okay, well then who played video games with her when she was a kid? Oh, maybe her dad played video games with her when they were a kid. And then you find out like that's her relationship with her father. And like, well, what happened to her father? We haven't introduced her dad yet. Maybe her dad's not there anymore. Like, how did that build her character? How did that build her relationship with Carly? What's their story arc together now, knowing all that we know about them? And just from that, it builds organically, and all of a sudden we have a whole storyline based on inter-character relations. We build other related characters to them who also build on the plot. And then just suddenly it's almost one of those situations where it feels like it writes itself. And it all just comes organically from starting with the character and then sort of working out from there.
I'm basically going to reiterate what a lot of these guys said very eloquently. I basically start with character as well. I think a lot of times people, when they're building their world, they have this super high resolution idea of all this stuff that's going on. But as Tim was saying, that's not germane to the story. Nobody cares about whatever's going on in Hawaii, in the world that you came up with. So I like to go with universal questions. So the first book, Soulfinder, was why do bad things happen to good people? Anybody could relate to that immediately. Once you know that's the question that we're starting with, like, okay, and now I need to find ways to make my character, Father Patrick Redder, relatable to anybody. Yes, he is a Catholic priest. Yes, he is a veteran. But I need to find ways where people can see themselves in his life and then build off from there. So it's one of those things where it's like, yes, you want to have the world built, but you don't need to spend all day, every day going into the minutia of whatever it is. So for me, I try and focus on key points in the character's life where I need to know about his relationship with his father and maybe key things that happened to him when he was a young man, when he was a teenager, these sort of like milestones in anybody's life. And then, yeah, maybe his favorite food because it relates on some level to his personality or whatnot. But I've seen over and over again, it seems that a lot of people, they build out this giant world and then they forget about the character, and then they don't understand why no one cares about their character. It's because you didn't focus on the character. So I like to start very small and then build out from there.
It's the philosophy should be people want to read your comic because they want the story and they want to be entertained. You're the storyteller. You guide them. What they don't want is the information dump. If they wanted the information dump, they would either read a visual guide or an encyclopedia. But to kind of put the advice of all these people together, and let's use Soulfinder as an example. Bryce, for example, said that whenever you have this world that you're building, one thing that you might not want to do is you don't want that first answer that comes into your head to the question. Because as Scott was saying, sometimes you're influenced by all these things because we consume so many media, so much film, so much TV. So one thing that's interesting about Doug, it's a fun trivia fact, is with Soulfinder, which is about combat veteran exorcists, guess what's the one movie he has not seen? The Exorcist. And I was like, you never saw The Exorcist? And he was like, I would want to, but I can't because I don't want to be influenced by what they do. I want to at least say that my book is 100% original. And to go over something that Mark said, when we were helping Doug with some of the scripting and some of the world, as we got closer to the finish line, I said, there's one thing missing. And the one thing missing is that there's something about his main character that seems almost two-dimensional. He's what you would expect. He's kind of like, a man of the cloth, but also like a veteran. He's kind of a hardline, go-getter, no-nonsense kind of guy. And so I asked Doug, I said, this is one of those moments where you take one of those little things, those factoids in your head, and you use it. So I said, Doug, what's his favorite food? And he was like, wait, what? And I said, no, what's his favorite food? He said, tater tots. And I said, we're gonna put that in the book. And it's a subliminal thing, because there's a scene in a diner where he is talking to someone and they've kind of had a nerve-wracking experience, and he's just sitting there and he's just like going to town on tater tots. I actually learned that from that show Justified, because in Justified, Raylan, he's a very similar character in that he's kind of this Dirty Harry type character who's like shoot first, ask questions later. But whenever he has a situation where he's kind of in an awkward spot, he just likes ice cream, and he'll just like be driving down the street talking to the deputy, and he's just licking ice cream cones. And so that subliminally tells the audience, yeah, this guy's a tough guy, but he likes a kid's food. So he's not all bad because he likes something It's fairly accessible and mundane. And I think that that element is there because when you read Soulfinder and you get to that point, it's in the reader's mind, even though they're not conscious about it. They're like, oh, he's kind of this tough guy, but he likes tater tots, which we can all agree is a good food to like. So again, it's these very subtle things where you have this repository of the world that you build in, but you're not going to dump it all at once. You're going to pluck and you're going to take parts of it to kind of add flavor to the story that you're telling. Oh, question, yes.
I kind of like on the flip side, what if I have, like I've got my characters, but I have like key moments in their story. I know how a very important thing is gonna help them develop, but I don't know how to get to those moments. I don't know how to connect this moment to that moment with like mundane, small events.
It's definitely a writer's question, so I'm gonna defer to these guys.
Well, you see, Scott handles a lot of the structure.
Never mind.
Two things. No. I got it. Because I am bad at that. Actually, when we outline, he'll do it first for structure, and then I'll rewrite it for details because I'm a little bit scatterbrained. But honestly, I think that when you have a bunch of ideas, that's kind of how it feels. It kind of feels like you have this like vortex in your head of just like a bunch of ideas, and none of them like are attached yet. What helps me, and this is where it gets like really just, it's kind of like personal preference, is actually writing things down physically. Like we do what we call a rough outline, which is where we essentially go, we're gonna bullet point each thing in the book. So it's gonna be like, okay, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, and anything we don't have an answer for, we leave a gap. We just go, okay, we know something needs to happen here, but we don't know what. We know something needs to happen here. And we keep doing that until we fill in all those gaps. And honestly, the way we do it is, I'm probably going to say it a lot today, but the question, just asking questions, and that's where the one thing about being a duo kind of helps is that if I don't have a question or don't have an answer to one, he has the question or has the answer. But that's where it's really important just to take time to ask yourself questions, ask yourself good questions, and just try and string together. Don't try and think of everything as needing to be very linear and needing to be just like strung together in a way that makes complete sense. Sometimes if you have a really good idea that you're like, I don't know how I get here, that's a good thing, because that means you are diverging onto a path that most people wouldn't have taken. And eventually, just enough of jotting things down and asking questions and stuff, it kind of always gets me to where I need to go. I don't know. What about you?
I'll chime in. Thank you, Bryce. The outline is important where you leave the blanks and you're in that spot you're talking about where you have, you're like, I don't know what happens here. But I think that's where, like you said, it's asking questions, but it's also trying to get in the minds of the characters. Like, I think one of the things that you hear a lot is like, let the characters write the story for you. And that like doesn't mean anything most of the time. It's like,
said that, okay.
It's like, yeah, it doesn't mean anything most of the time, except for when Mark says it. But, it's like, but when you can really do that is when you have those blanks and you say like, okay, well, I know that this happens and then something happens and then we get somewhere else and you know what the somewhere else is and you know the thing before it, so you ask like, what would the characters be feeling in the situation? What would they be wanting to do? Like, what is something, if that doesn't answer the question, like if there's nothing that they would do to get to the next event, just say like, okay, well, how could that happen? Like, what is a reason they could end up in this next situation, this next scene that I have? Like you said, it really all boils down to just asking yourself questions and trying to figure it out, because that's how it's like, it's really hard to just, create in a vacuum, like the blank page thing. And so having a question to jump off of is a lot easier. And that's where having like those story beats that you want to get to, you just don't know how, that's where that helps, because like what questions to ask. It's already there. It's not like you're just starting from scratch. So I think that that's actually a good spot to be in.
To defend myself. So I actually agree with a lot of what they're saying, because basically what it sounds like is that you have like point A, point B, point C. How do I get from A to B and then from B to C? And what we've learned, Tim and I collaborating, is a lot of that connective tissue is the character work, because you have your big plot-oriented moments, like when we do our breakdowns first, we work out a summary, and then we do page breakdowns to make sure that if we're doing a 60-page book, that's enough real estate for the story we want to tell. And sometimes that's where we have to do the trimming, or sometimes we have to do the bloating, or whatever, to get from A to B. We know like Act 1, we have this event, Act 2, we have this event, Act 3, we have this event. How do we get them from one event to the next? And just to give an example of a situation that happened to us was with Kamen America Volume 6. Tim and I worked out the outline, so we knew exactly the plot summary that we wanted, and then we did the page breakdowns, and then I scripted it, and we agreed on it every step of the way, but then, a plan falls apart when the mission actually starts, because then Tim was drawing it, and he's like, I know we agreed on all this stuff, it's just something about it isn't working. It's too much plot and not enough character. It almost just seems like we're taking the reader by a hand and just saying, this is what happens next, this is what happens next, the plot moves forward here, something's missing. And so while Tim was drawing Act 1, I re-scripted Acts 2 and 3 on the fly, trying to lay the track as the train was moving. And instead, we said, how are the characters going to move us from point A to point B? So instead of having some big fight scene in Act 2 that we had originally scripted, where they're just bouncing all over the country, just trying to basically keep up with the plot, we had them take a breather. The characters are all in a hotel room because they're traveling, and we're just watching what the characters do with each other, how they talk to each other, and those move the character plot. So you have your major plot arc, but then you have your character arcs. And those can be just as interesting. I mean, a show like Cowboy Bebop has the vicious arc, and that's only 4 episodes in the entire 26-episode series. The rest of the series is just watching these character arcs, finding out Faye's backstory, finding out Ed's backstory and Spike's backstory, and how they all relate to each other. And that's all just as interesting as the larger story arc. And a lot of your readers will come in, and that's what they want. That's, to them, the meat and potatoes is what the characters are doing, while others, the meat and potatoes is what's the big picture. And so if you give yourself those moments, those smaller moments where the characters are interacting with each other, that will give you the solution that you need to move you from A to B. It's this character has a connection to another character who's involved with the larger plot. How do they interact with each other, and how does that, and then all of a sudden you've got your bridge from A to B or B to C. And it isn't moving quite so frenetically, and sometimes slowing down actually helps out a lot.
So I've sort of been blessed because I have a wife who I know loves me and wants the best for me, but she's also able to be like, why are you such an idiot? And why did you do this? It should be this, and it should be that, and it should be that. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually a really good idea. And so she takes care of it. She's basically the puppet master. I'm a giant fraud. My wife is really behind Soulfinder. But when she isn't there to help me out with these questions, like these guys were saying, it's really about asking yourself the right questions. So if you're stuck for too long, it could be you're asking the wrong questions, and then you're getting the wrong answers, and you need to ask yourself different questions. And as they all said, there's certain things that you have to get from point A to point B, but you also know that you have to work within the confines of the character and their personality and their motivations. And so again, it's what is the logical thing that this person would do in this situation that could actually get me to this point on the creative map where I'm trying to go. And usually if you just think about it for long enough time, you'll get 5 possibilities, and then you pick the best one. Or sometimes it's good to just put it in the shelf for a couple days and step away from it because you're thinking too much about it and you're beating yourself up, and just relax. Just go for a bike ride or something like that for a couple days and chill out, and then come back to it, and then sometimes the answer will come to you. But ultimately, it's really about just asking the right questions, and eventually you'll get there. You just have to have a little bit of patience with yourself.
Over there in the back, yes?
So, how do you manage between working on the comic and full-time job?
This guy knows our deepest lore. So, we have full-time jobs as well. Some people know it, not a lot of people do. Mark and I still work. I'm an audiologist, and he works at a university. We use a lot of time management is what it boils down to. So that just means that I have about 15, 16 working hours a day, and I have to decide on when do I sleep, when do I eat, and what things can I cut out. So hobby-wise, I don't have a lot of hobbies because that has to go out the window if I know I need to do a page a day, which is my workflow. I pride myself on not much other than being a hard worker, so I do think my work ethic is good. I sleep an average of 4 hours a night, and like I said, not many hobbies, but one thing I do, and this is why I was picking Scott's brain on our way here the other day. I was asking him, like, what do you do to work faster? Because a page would normally take me about 10 hours a day, but ever since I got like Procreate for my iPad, I was able to cut that down to like 8 hours a day. And from that point, I started using brushes to help with things like backgrounds and things. So now I can do a page in typically 6 hours. So I'm always trying to find ways to work more efficiently and to use my time wisely. That's what it really boils down to. And in comics, and it's a larger discussion that would have to take up in their panel, but in comics, the beauty of it is there are a lot of artists and writing tricks that you can do, and they never fail because they're built into the medium. For example, Mark will tell you that when you're writing, you always leave your surprise for the even numbered page. If you read a book that's a horror book and they don't do this, that means that the writer is not good because it's writing 101. Comics is a medium. It is not just storyboards from a movie put into 32 pages. If someone tells you that, they're just trying to pitch to Netflix. They don't know how comics works. If you're writing a horror book, or if it's something like us where there's a reveal of a villain, you don't put that on the odd numbered page because when you flip the page, you can already see what's happening over there. You put it on the even page so when they get to it, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. And in comics, as the artist, Scott and I will both agree on this, when you're doing a background, for example, and you know that the characters are going to be, let's say, here in panel room D for 2 pages, you just have to draw the background one time. And the rest of the time, you have like the same background and you blur it out, or you put just a little bit of detail, because the human brain, it revolves around pattern recognition. It knows, okay, the characters are in panel room D. As you're reading 2 pages, it's not paying attention to the background anymore. That's gone. It knows
I would
already.
not want to draw all these chairs.
We do not want to draw all these chairs, and as much as we like you, we don't want to draw each of you all the time. So you'll notice they do this in manga a lot, where what they'll do is they'll draw this crowd scene, but then as you look at the panels, they don't have any features anymore. The people go into the background and they're either half toned out or whited out, or they're just silhouettes, because the brain is smart. The brain knows, well, I don't need to see these people all the time. I know that they're there. And so as I'm working, I ask myself, okay, I didn't get much sleep last night. My wife is working today, so that means I have to do a lot of errands and things. I gotta finish this page in 5 hours. Shortcut time. What can I do to manage my time wisely? And Mark and I and all of us, we're on social media, but you'll notice that we don't mess around a lot. I mean, we'll do an interview here and there, but we don't live stream a lot. We don't try and get into arguments a lot. We just try to kind of hunker down, and it's like, okay, I've looked at Twitter for about 20 minutes. It's over. I gotta go and work because I got better things to do than mess around. So that's the most important thing. One of the reasons why manga artists in Japan dominate is because their work ethic makes us look like we're lazy people, because they're just constantly hustling. They don't have any time for anything, much less social media. And so I would say that for any person who's a writer or an artist, if you really want to perfect your craft, you got to manage your time wisely, and you got to devote all your time that you have in your spare time to just working on that.
Well, just so from the writer's point of view, about time management is so, as Bryce was talking about, outlines I found are the most important thing. Tim and I, we workshop a summary, which is just all of our notes collaborated into a linear plot synopsis, a bunch of paragraphs. Then if I'm doing a book that's 60 pages, then I do the page breakdowns next, where I just take that summary and I break it up, like page 1 this happens, page 2 this happens, 3, 4, 5. And then once I have pages 1 through 60 all outlined, then the scripting goes so much easier and so much faster, because I'm never having to think about what happens next. I've already worked that out in advance. And then when I have to do the scripting, it's like, okay, well, it's a 60-page book. If I can script 5 pages a day, then I can have it done in 12 days. That's 2 weeks. I can have the script to 10 in 2 weeks. So I know my deadline. I know how many pages I have to do every day. And then it's just like, all right, if I don't write 5 pages a day, then I didn't do my full day's work of writing. If I only wrote 4 pages one day, then I got to write 6 pages the next day, because I got to get it done in 2 weeks. And so just breaking down and compartmentalizing how you spend your time It makes it a lot easier, it makes it go a lot faster, and once you have a rapport like with your artist, then it's pretty much, I don't want to say assembly line because that then makes it sound like, we're the McDonald's of comics, but if you have it down to a pattern, if you have it down to a science, then you never get caught up, you're never late, and you can always hit your deadlines, even if you do work a full-time job every day like we do.
We have 2 minutes left, so unless there's any really quick questions, anyone who has a really quick question. Let's go with, yeah, you sir.
Oh, okay, so with all that time management, how are you doing that? How do you manage that with Doug Ernst thrown in the mix with your crossovers?
Basically, he's good at time management too. I mean, like, we all make our deadlines, and so whenever we do crossovers, a lot of that is pre-planning. So I mean, like, we don't just do the crossover willy-nilly and it's just like a 1-week procedure. I mean, it took years. Soulfinder, at the time, people were asking, like, are you guys gonna do a crossover? And we never gave an answer because we said, if it's not part of the story, then we don't want to force it. We found an opening. Essentially, something happened in our story where we started introducing the supernatural element, and because we did that organically, we said, now the readers will buy it. If we had done that from the get-go, they probably would have thought this is really far-fetched, like to have this sudden crossover. Our book is, I mean, we have a book for everyone, whether you're 5 years old or 50 years old, we have something for you. But Doug's book is more catered to young adults. Ours is catered more towards teenagers, so people would say, well, this book's more serious, our book's more lighthearted. I just don't see the two of them meshing together. But over years of time, he developed a story organically, we developed one organically, so by the time that they cross over, people weren't surprised. They were like, oh, okay, that's the way it is, and it makes perfect sense. Real quick, so we want to thank everyone for coming to our panel. These gentlemen have come from a long way. We drove from Arkansas, even though I lived here in Belton for 6 years. It was some of the best years of my life, and my wife was a resident, was doing a residency over at Baylor Scott & White, and we loved it. It's great. Mr. Scott and Mr. Bryce, they both came here from Kentucky, and Mr. Ernst came here from Reno, Nevada. So we want to say 6 years of Bell County Comic Con going strong, and it's getting better and better every time. So thank you for being here. We're going to be at the Iconic Comics panel all day today and tomorrow. So if you have any questions, be sure to stop by, say hello. We're in Hall A. If you got the VIP bags, if you have your lanyards, we did all the intellectual property art for all of them. We'll be more than happy to sign autographs and answer any questions that you have. So have a good day and great weekend here at Bell County Comic Con. Thank you guys very much. And
Thank you so much.
We'll see you guys downstairs.
Thank you.